each customer class. It identifies areas where cost subsidies and cost subsidies exist, and it evaluates and analyzes the rates. Now, we are going to look at the review of the cost of service study undertaken by the IRC. So, DOMLEC submitted over the year, of course, we conducted a comprehensive review of DOMLEC financial data. So we review, we examine, we analyze the financial data and the operational data. So for the cost of service study, what was analyzed was the cost of service data set by customer classes. So we got the spreadsheet and the cost drivers, and we at the IRC were able to reconcile the figures against the test year, which is 2023 data sets. So that test year comprised of 6 months actual and 6 months operating projected values. We were able to review the revenue requirement, the rate base, the pre-tax WACC, and the rated and the return on the rate base by customer classes. So this is what the cost of service allows. It allows us to disaggregate and to allocate cost, revenue, income, and expenses by customer classes. The allocation metric to allocate the value and to allocate costs by key functional area and customer class. We were able to review their load research study, which was based on 12 months of energy load and energy consumption data across customer classes using allocation metrics such as monthly average, peak demand, in excess of peak demand, just to name a few. We analyzed the energy consumption data based on the load research study to determine the allocation metric for peak demand and monthly average energy demand for each customer class. So I'm using the word each customer class to get across that what it does, it disaggregates each parameters in terms of functional activity or what we call cost driver and the number of customers. Then we were able to analyze the 2023 cost of service study based on the test year, and we were able to confirm the true cost of providing service to the system and the customer classes. We were able to determine the revenue shortfall in the system and customer classes. We were able to identify where cross-subsidy and subsidization among customer classes exist. We were able to review and confirm the correctness of the proposed tariff bill impact simulation with geothermal for all customer classes, and we were able to analyze the proposed tariff with geothermal against the current electricity rates. So we are in the process of approving and approve the proposed rate, but currently, as I stand, the existing rate is still being applied. Now we will move to this slide, which shows the outcome following the cost of service financial model, following its finding. So what we are seeing there, as indicated in the first column, it disaggregates the revenue requirement into 3 categories: generation, transmission and distribution, and customers. Now, we also talk about we are able to use the cost, which was the test year value, and we were able to use the model allows for the costs to be allocated among operating costs, among capital investment costs. So here you are seeing the expenditures by the various categories. Now in the third column, we are seeing the allocation factor. Now the load research study was used to determine the allocation factor in terms of energy usage, in terms of, we've seen a lot of terminology there, but more or less the average energy usage by a monthly, by over a 12-month period, you determine the percentage and then you allocate it to the various customer categories. Further, it disaggregates the customer categories. So we are seeing domestic, commercial, single means small groups of customers who are using like about 500 kilowatt hours of energy, and the free phase would be larger customer. The category of industrial, hotel, and street light customer. And we are seeing the total breakdown of the cost. Now, if you look at the last row, we are seeing we have a revenue from electricity sales. So that revenue from electricity sales is based on DOMLEC's test year for 2023. So we are seeing the revenue from electricity sale is 63 million. Now we are seeing the total revenue requirement of 112,000 million, but do not take that seriously because fuel is not factored in it. When you see fuel purchase, fuel expense, and purchase power, this is not factored in it. Because why? The fuel cost is shown as a separate line item in calculating, so it's a pass-through cost. So, in a nutshell, the revenue requirement following the cost of service study in actual is $65.9 million. As I said, the cost of service is a tool that is used to determine the actual cost of operating. So once we remove that 46 million and the 61 million, these are pass-through costs. The actual revenue requirement following the cost of service study is in fact 65 million. And this is what, on that basis, the rate is being applied. The 63 million is the test year figure that was applied in 2023. Now, the test year figure is a baseline for determining the proposed rates. Now, if we look at the other slide, we are seeing the base revenue and the revenue requirement. That's the base revenue based on the test year and the cost of service. So where we are seeing 63 million, we are seeing there that 63 million is broken down based on the test year, which is the energy from revenue from electricity sales. So it's broken down in the category of domestic, commercial, industrial, hotel, and street light. This is the existing tariff structure. Now, when we use the cost of service model to determine the revenue requirement, we are seeing, therefore, on the domestic, commercial, industrial, street light customer, the required revenue that DOMLEC need is 65 million. So we are seeing, therefore, that they are in need of at least 2.6 million to meet the cost of operating, cost of providing service to customer classes. Now, under each category, it is showing us which customer category are overpaying and which customer category are underpaying. So we are seeing, therefore, commercial customers are overpaying for electricity, even the cost of service, and street light customers are overpaying even the cost of service. On the flip side, domestic, hotel, and industrial customers are underpaying for electricity. So the cost of service study is telling us that overall it's showing us what the system needs per kilowatt, and it also shows us for each customer classes what is required. Now, this the difference between the cost of service data, 63 million, and the 63 million is the test year, and 65 million is the cost of service. It shows that DOMLEC is in need of a 4% increase in order to meet its revenue requirements. And it shows us per customer category. Now, the analysis. The cost of service provides an accurate representation of DOMLEC costs of deriving electricity for customer group. Accordingly, the company is able to align rates more precisely across customer classes, particularly where adjustments are needed the most. So DOMLEC's revenue requirement exhibits a shortfall of $2.5 million or 4%. As I said, this difference is as a result of the cost of service study as at the year 2023 and the test year data for the base revenue as at 2023. Also, we saw cost subsidization is identified among commercial and streetlight customers, with their commercial overpaying for 2.76% and streetlight overpaying by 15.06% respectively. The need for subsidy, because domestic, commercial, industrial and hotel customers are underpaying, it is telling us that somebody needs to subsidize for that category. Or customer class need to subsidize for that customer category because they are underpaid. If we had to use based on the cost of service study, it would have been more for domestic, industrial and hotel. So we are seeing, therefore, under the existing structure that commercial and streetlight are filling the gap for domestic, industrial and hotel customers. Now we are showing a comparison of the proposed revised tariff and against the existing rates. So based on the proposed rates for domestic, we are seeing a proposed rate. There's two tier, which is block 1 at 50 kilowatt per hour and block 2 in excess of 50. So in the proposed rate, we are seeing, therefore, there's an 8% decrease. In block 2, there's a 12.34% decrease when we compare the proposed with the existing structure. Also, in terms of modernizing our tariff design, we look at domestic time of use. So we are seeing, therefore, you have the peak rate 0.654 and the off-peak rate is 0.6354. Now, there's also a customer charge, which of course DOMLEC will explain this as we go along. We're also seeing the rates for small business customers, and we're seeing the customer charge associated with that. Also, we have the commercial rates on and off peak, the customer charge, which of course are flat rates, hotel customer on and off peak, with of course a customer charge and a demand charge. DOMLEC will further explain. And industrial customer, we are seeing, therefore, with the rate as the proposed rate and the existing rate, we are seeing a slight 2.73% increase in the on-peak rates. And high voltage customer on peak, because in the existing tariff structure, there is time of use tariff for industrial customers, so therefore we're able to do that comparison. So we are seeing for the high voltage, there's a 2.01% increase in the on and in the off peak, there's a 0.81%. Now the analysis overall shows that domestic, small business standard, and commercial time of use customer will enjoy a reduction in the proposed tariff compared to the existing rates. Domestic standard 2-tier tariff for block 1 and 2 will decrease, as I said, by 8.65% and 12.39% respectively. This will provide relief to over 7,600 low-income customers. For domestic time of use, over 13,800 domestic customers can achieve energy cost saving to up to 6 cents per kilowatt hour or 8.62% during the off-peak compared to the on-peak. During the off-peak, because the off-peak offers a lower rate. So if you are able to shift your load during the off-peak rate, you can enjoy that cost savings. Small business customer can realize a moderate reduction in energy rates of 2.66% compared to the existing commercial rates, because small business is currently on the commercial customer category. But in the new structure or modernized tariff structure, there's a category for small business customer using up to 500 kilowatt hour of electricity. Time of use commercial, hotel, industrial, and high voltage customer can realize cost savings ranging from 8.44%, 9.44%, 11.51%, and 9.29% respectively during the off-peak period compared to the on-peak period. Why? Again, lower rates during the off-peak period. However, time of use industrial and high voltage customer will experience a slight increase in the on-peak period compared to the existing rates of 2.01% and 2.75%. Overall, the proposed rate per kilowatt hour is lower than the cost of providing service or as identified in the cost of service study. If we go back, remember in the cost of service study, to provide those costs, it is more for each customer category. So for domestic, it would have zero. So the cost of providing service, it would have been 0.718. But we are seeing, therefore, the rate is lower. And the same applies for commercial customer, hotel customer. The cost of service study is higher. So our DOMLEC goal is to aim to flatten that curve. So the time of use, however, further mitigation to impact the reduction in the revenue required shortfall. Over the test year, DOMLEC has introduced fixed monthly charges. So although the cost of service studies show rates is higher for all customer category in comparison to the proposed tariff structure, the proposed rate is lower in comparison to the cost of service study. However, to cushion that gap of the $2.6 million, DOMLEC is will charge customer flat monthly rates to cushion that impact. However, time of use pricing structure encourage greater operational efficiency so customers have some choice. Now, we move to the analysis of the proposed revised tariff bill impact simulation with geothermal. So we are seeing the energy, the cost saving that customers will realize with the proposed, or can realize with the proposed revised tariff when geothermal is commissioned. Now, we have to be mindful. So we cannot say, okay, our electricity rate is reducing a little and therefore use up more electricity, you will see a higher bill. So if, for example, you have a domestic customer whose average consumption is 100 kilowatt per month, under the proposed revised tariff with geothermal, it will be $93.45. If we compare it with the existing rate, we've seen a percentage saving of $17.33. Domestic time of use customer, if the average consumption is 250, can realize a cost savings of 11.4% reduction in the bill. Similarly, small business customers with a usage of 500 under the proposed revised tariff, there is $568.45 compared to the existing, which is $666.21. There is a cost savings of $14% and 14.69%. Commercial large with a 2,416 kilowatt hour usage, compare with the proposed and the existing rate, they can realize a 10.47% reduction. Water large with consumption of 8,609 kilowatt hours under the proposed revised tariff with geothermal, the cost of the bill would have been $9,553.60. They would have realized an 11.71% reduction in their bill. Industrial customer with a consumption of energy usage of 14,402 kilowatts, they would have realized a 9.47% reduction in their bill. High voltage customer with an energy usage of 72,372 kilowatt hour would realize an 11.62% reduction. So I am saying this, the reduction is based on your usage. So if, for example, you see on average, or I'm a domestic customer and my average usage is $250, and then IRC say, okay, you're supposed to get an 11% reduction. However, you put, because of that, you put a AC in your bedroom. You buy an electric oven. Your demand will increase. So if your demand increase, your usage increase, your cost will go up. So you cannot say, oh, IRC and DOMLEC say, if I use 250, my bill will go down by 11%, and therefore I'm seeing my bill went up by X amount percent. You have to aim to manage your usage, and that is why it is important for customer to utilize the time of use option as a bargaining chip. So we have to be mindful of our usage so that we are able to get the cost savings we are able to realize. So each of us know what is our usage based on our consumption profile, then therefore that will determine how much money you are saving on your bill. We also did a comparison and analysis of the proposed tariff impact without geothermal under the existing tariff structure. So the existing tariff structure does not have time of use. It only has 4 customer categories: domestic, commercial, industrial, and street light customer. So when we look at the proposed tariff without geothermal against the existing rate, we've seen an increase. Okay, we've seen an increase ranging from 2.38% to 11.09%. We also did another analysis, or as a comparative analysis, of the projected revised tariff with and without geothermal. We are seeing significant increase. Okay? When we look at the proposed tariff without geothermal, we are seeing, and the proposed tariff with geothermal, without the geothermal, we would have seen a significant increase in each customer category. So we are seeing the decrease in our bill is attributed to the commissioning of the geothermal power plant on the grid. Okay, so the reduction in the proposed tariff bill impact for all customer class ranges from 9.47% to 17.33%. The reduction in the electricity bill is largely attributed to the addition of geothermal energy to the grid. Marginal increases if there is no geothermal energy. Okay? Significant increase if we had a scenario of geothermal with or no geothermal. Without the introduction of time of use, we would have seen a significant increase. So we are seeing, therefore, that the off-peak rate is going to help consumers. We are all consumers. So we have to aim to embrace the new tariff structure and embrace the off-peak to be able to realize that reduction in our bill given our average consumption level. So again, it will range, all customer category will realize a reduction in the bill given the average consumption level from 9.47% to 17.3%. Now we also have VAT being applied in our bill. So what is going to happen? Because of the time of use customer, VAT will be applied first on the 150 kilowatt hour during the peak hours. So of course that will realize in a lower reduction in VAT. Okay, so that will be applied on the first 150 usage during the peak period. Now, commercial, industrial, hotel, and high voltage customers can benefit from economies of scale. Why? Because the bill impact, it will result in higher bill savings in monetary terms. Okay? So, in a nutshell, we are seeing, therefore, that it's a positive vibe. It's a positive outcome if we manage our consumption. If we utilize the cost of service, customer can manage the consumption, we can realize a reduction in our bill if we manage it effectively, and also DOMLEC can get that additional revenue requirement that they need in order to operate effectively. So the Commissioner attests to the accuracy of the data set based on the embedded cost of service study, and the supporting worksheet would form part of the test year supporting document which led to the rate adjustment. The customer believed that the proposed revised rate with geothermal is fair and reasonable, and restructuring of the tariff design will benefit customer in the following way: fairer prices to customer in all category, reduction in electricity bill or energy usage for all customer classes ranging from 4.7% to 17.33% based on your usage. So if you remain within your current range, you will realize that. Time of use customer can shift certain load to off-peak to attract lower rates. And demand charge applied to large customer will balance grid load distribution. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lee, for this very comprehensive overview and analysis. So I guess over the coming weeks in April, August, we'll have to be gathering with our families and reviewing that information so we can strategize and see how we're going to fit for both residential and commercial. So we move over to DOMLEC's presentation, which will be next, and two people will be presenting that. Mr. Quinton Gregor will start us off. He's the financial accountant accountant, and Mr. Felix Julian as well. So the two of them together will give us further breakdown and analysis so we can wrap up this evening. DOMLEC team, welcome.
So, good evening, everybody. It's Quentin Gregoire. How did we get here? Many consultations done in 2024. We have the depreciation study, the revenue requirement, WACC, weighted average cost of capital, and also the 5-year investment plan. Now, the first three that I called all feed into the cost of service study. The results of those items feed into the cost of service study. And what is the cost of service study? It is a structured analysis used primarily by utilities to determine the total annual cost of providing services, including operational expenses, depreciation, and a return on investment. It ensures that rates are set equitably across different customer classes based on the cost they impose on the system. The main goal is to establish a legal, fair, and justifiable revenue requirement, that is the total revenue needed to operate, and then allocate that cost among the customer classes. Now, very important, in previous consultations, the WACC, the weighted average cost of capital, gave a result of 9.82%. And that was agreed by stakeholders, the IRC and DOMLEC. And that 9.82% WACC resulted in a 5.5% adjustment in base rates. That is the revenue required for DOMLEC, and that also was agreed. However, DOMLEC has decided to reduce this to a 4% adjustment, right? So the 4% adjustment in base rates resulting from a 9.2% WACC, note that is below the industry standards. Now, if you look at the graph, the first blocks is the total system. The other blocks are the classes that I spoke about, the different sectors. The line, the dotted line going across is the WACC, pre-tax WACC, and that is at the 9.2%. Now, you can see that domestic, commercial, green, industrial, hotel is all below that line except the street lighting. The line is what we would like to achieve. To achieve that line, the returns for each sector has to total a 4% adjustment in base rates. That is to understand where the 4% is coming from. Now, to achieve the 4% adjustment, some sectors can go above the line, some can go below, which means that an increase in certain rates has to a decrease in certain rates. But overall, we would like to achieve a 4% adjustment. Now, the cost of service study serves as a guide to equitably adjust those rates to achieve that 4% adjustment. Also factoring customer affordability and economic development, the rates were set accordingly. Now, Mr. Felix Julian will present those rates.
Thank you, Quentin. My name is Felix Julian. I am Business Development Engineer at DOMLEC and the Tariff Team Lead. Now, Mrs. Lee gave you the detail, the theoretical detail, and we're just going to give you the synopsis of what all of these calculations and consultations and the work of our tariff consultant resulted in. And I would like to say thank you to all the members of the tariff team on DOMLEC side and to our tariff consultant, Mr. Bill Vinage, who spent years working with us to come up with these results. Right? We'd also like to thank the members of the IRC for being diligent and following this process through all these years. It's been a difficult process, a time-consuming process, but in the end, I think we arrived in a good place. Now, what I'm going to show you is just a comparison from the old rates to the new rates, right? And there are a number of new elements that we will just, when I arrive there, I will explain to you what the intricacies of these new elements are. Right, so first, the existing domestic rate. What you have with the existing domestic rate, all domestic customers will charge with these rates. It comprises of the $2.50, which is a minimum charge. So what that means is that if you consumed 0 kilowatt hours, you will be charged $2.50. If you consume $2.50 worth of electricity, you will be charged $2.50, and you will just be charged what you consume anytime you're above that, right? So it's a minimum charge, right? So if you compare it to the two domestic categories now, these are the new domestic categories, domestic standard and domestic time of use. You have a fixed customer charge, and that fixed customer charge is $5 for the domestic categories. So the existing customer domestic class, which is all the residential customers, got split into two categories, and one category is on the block rate and the other category is on the time of use rate. Now, I think customers need to understand that, because it's not all of the residential customers that will be on time of use rates, right? So the overwhelming majority of domestic customers will not be on time of use rates. That number is about 22,000 customers who will be on the domestic standard rate, which is a block rate. So if you compare the block rates as they were before, you have 57.8 cents. That's what it is presently for the first 50 kilowatt hours, and above that it is 67 cents. Now the rate would be lower, which would be 52.8 cents and 57.8 cents for the second block, right? So, as you can see, the domestic standard, which is the largest category of customers, which is 22,000 customers, those customers will have a reduction in the electricity rate itself, right? But you do have the $5 customer charge, which is a fixed cost, which is added on top of that, right? So that will bring up the collection revenue from that class, right? So when we come to the end of the bill impact, you will see that, as Mrs. Louis explained, there is a reduction in the cost for domestic customers. The second category of domestic customer is the domestic time of use. And those customers which are above 150 kilowatt hours of usage will get time of use. So there will be the $5 charge as usual, and then the domestic time of use will be, if you look a little lower at the bottom right, you will see it is 69 cents, 69.54 cents for the peak and 63.54 cents for the off-peak. So you will be able to save if you use more electricity at night than you do presently, right? Now, in addition to that, all customers, as you know, will be charged with the fuel charge, and as they are now, and then there's an additional charge which will be called the purchase power charge or geothermal charge, right? And when we come to that, we will explain it in addition. So, go to the next slide. Right. So, the next category is the commercial category, the existing commercial category, which include all customers which are not hotel, not industrial, and not residential either. All right? So those are all the business classes. That class has been divided into two, which is the small business, which is the small business customers that are using up to $500 and will have a fixed customer charge of $5 and a rate of 69 cents, 69.4 cents. Whereas the present rate is 71.3 cents per kilowatt hour. In addition, those customers who are paying now $4.32 per kVA in demand charges, and they will not be paying any demand charges going forward. So that was done in order to reduce costs for small businesses. Right. So the present existing commercial customers, the largest set of those, and that's about 1,200, 1,300 customers in that region. Those customers will get the commercial rate, right? And that rate is 71.01 cents in the peak and 65.01 in the off-peak, right? If you compare to the present rate, which is 71.3 cents, there is a very slight reduction in the rate itself, right? But in addition to that, you have the $50 fixed charge, and you have the $12.50 demand charge per kilowatt, right? So, go to the next slide. So for the final slide for the rates themselves, hotels, the present hotel rate is 63.3 cents per kilowatt hour, right? And the new hotel rate will be, they will get time of use, right? So what you have basically in this rate is, in this rate design, is an expansion of time of use. That's one of the key features of the new rate design, an expansion of time of use rates. So whereas customers who were domestic were not afforded time of use, hotels did not get time of use, industrial customers were the only ones who could use time of use in the previous tariff design. So presently, going back to the hotel customers, whereas they were 63.3 cents per kilowatt hour, then the new rate would be 63.54 cents per kilowatt hour and 57.54 cents per kilowatt hour in the off-peak. And that is, as you can see, it's a reduction, a slight reduction in the off-peak, right? It's basically the same on peak, and there's a reduction in off-peak. But along with that, there is the fixed charge and the demand charge, right? So industrial previously was 63.3 cents in the peak and 58.1 cents in the off-peak, right? And that's now 65.03 cents in the peak and 59.03 cents in the off-peak, right? And all of these categories, commercial, hotel, industrial, can be as well high voltage customers, right? And the high voltage customers, their rates would be 64.57 cents in the peak and 58.57 cents in the off-peak. And that also comes with a fixed customer charge. Right? So, to the next slide. Right. So the additional bill elements, right? One obviously is demand, which we spoke about. Demand applies to customers, right, who are commercial, hotel, industrial, and high voltage. Those customers previously paid $4.32 per kVA, and now will be paying $12.50 per kilowatt, right? The customers with a maximum demand of less than 50 kilowatts, they will pay the metered demand for that particular month. Right? And for customers with a maximum demand greater than 50 kilowatts, they'll pay the metered demand for the current month or the maximum demand during the previous 11 months, whichever one is greater. Right? So essentially that means that for one of these categories, if this month your demand, for example, is 100 kilowatts, you would look back 11 months and you would pick whichever demand is higher, and that would be the bill for the particular month. Right? And in addition to that, there will be a reactive power surcharge, and that will apply to customers over 50 kVA. If you want to know more about that, we can get into that in the question period. For all customers, there will be two additional things that we should go into. Fuel charge, which previously would be called fuel surcharge, right? So the fuel now is a complete pass-through. So all what DOMLEC, the cost that DOMLEC incurs for fuel, all of that will be passed on directly to the customers in a cents per kilowatt hour, as you see now on your bill, right? So it will not be called fuel surcharge, it will not be called fuel charge, right? And in addition to that, there is the purchase power charge, which the main element of that is the geothermal charge, right? And that will come on your bill, same way like the fuel surcharge, it will be a 100% pass-through. So when DOMLEC purchases that power from geothermal, that power is passed through to the customer at exactly the rate that we buy it. There is no markup, no change in the amounts. It's passed to the customers in a cents per kilowatt hour, just the same as you would get with the fuel surcharge. And you will see that separate charge on your bill as a customer, right? So, yes, so this is essentially the same slide that Mrs. Louis showed with the estimated savings that customers are expected to receive, and the main driver of that is geothermal, right? I won't go into the details of it because it was already gone through, and you can just move to the next. All right, so the final thing is just for us to discuss why DOMLEC is asking for a rate adjustment now. So the last rate adjustment was in 2007, which is basically 19 years ago, and the rates at that time will increase by 2 cents, right? In those 19 years, right, there has been a significant increase in the cost of operation for DOMLEC, right? And there have been a few major events, the most prominent of which were Hurricane Maria and the COVID pandemic, right? So why these two incidents are important is that after Hurricane Maria, there was a drive to build back better, right? So one of the things we did was try to build the network be more resilient going forward. So for instance, the class of poles that we use is now a better class of pole, right? So it's a more expensive pole, so obviously that's an increased cost. Also, our insurance costs went up after the hurricane as well. Of course, the COVID pandemic was important because of the logistical difficulties that we experienced. So costs of getting a lot of products and their lead times increased around that time. So these are some of the effects. And then just by natural, what would you call it, inflation over these 19 years, you would expect that there would be an increased cost, right? So we feel that it's a very modest cost, that it's a very modest 4% adjustment in the rates after 19 years. I think we can see that we can breathe a sigh of relief that after 19 years, this is the quantum of the increase, really. And because geothermal is coming on, it will allow us to make sure that customers do not actually see an increase in their bill at the end of the month, right? So essentially that is it. So we will take questions now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gregor and Mr. Julian, for this explanation, which has really helped us understand much better. I hope you guys have been taking notes and have your questions already. We have a mic which we will be using around on the platform, so if anyone is ready with questions, you could raise your hand and we can take the mic to you. Mr. Julian, I don't think you should have sat down as yet today because I believe you're going to get about 50 questions this evening. And yes, they're all going to be coming on. Okay, we have a question at the back.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, I don't have many questions, but the first one I want to ask is, I noticed that you, in your presentation, you said you had to take in the work into consideration in coming to your decision. But I noticed you reduced the cost of equity. Is it because the shareholders figure they're getting too much, or it's a means of reducing the rates?
Well, the WAC, we decided to take a lower WAC, basically, and that the reason for that is really sort of a compromise in a sense, right? In order to ensure that customers get lower rates.
Okay, that's the main thing. All right. The other question is I want to ask as well is, did you carry a study to see what the rates, the impact on rates on the poor?
Could you repeat your question, please, Mr. Paul? Thank you.
No, I said was a study carried to see how the rates will be impacting the poor in our community?
No, there wasn't a separate study specifically on how the rates would impact the poor. But the principle behind the first block at a reduced rate was to ensure that that was taken into consideration in giving those who have lower means a reduction in rates.
But don't you think the inflationary pressures that have been going on and what we expect would have an impact on the poor itself? And I mean that could probably help you all to tell the government probably the first 50 or 100 you don't charge VAT on it or something of the nature to have a relief for the poor.
Well, presently there is an exemption up to $150 for VAT on electricity. Customers own only 150 kilowatt hours. It's the consumption, right? So if you consume up to 150 kilowatt hours, you don't pay VAT, right? And that amount was increased around the time of the pandemic, I believe, from 100 to 150. Yeah. So it went up to 150 as an exemption.
Okay, my last question, that's to the IRC. Is there anything in place to ensure that DOMLEC become more efficient? Because we still have a fuel, right? We still have a fuel charge.
Okay, the onus is on DOMLEC to become more efficient, and I believe that they are taking some internal interventions to do so. However, the IRC, over the same period of the tariff review, had some consultants on board working on the introduction of a few KPIs that will assist with further allowing DOMLEC to pursue more efficiency in the areas that they can be efficient. So this will be focused on more after the tariff is approved, as right now the focus is just to get the tariff approved and so on. But the KPI is already something we have worked on, and we had several meetings with DOMLEC over the period. However, because the tariff is taking more precedence, we are focusing on that at this point in time.
Yeah, let me just add something to that. So, DOMLEC, in our planning and our goals, every year we take efficiency and we always have KPIs that we're looking. So, for instance, our losses, we're planning to work on reducing the losses further from what they are presently. And also there is a natural increase in efficiency in generation that will happen as a result of geothermal. And what I mean by that is that typically during the day you have more generators on, and the more generators, you start with the most efficient generators first, those that use the least fuel per kilowatt hour, and then as the load increases you start adding generators and you get the more inefficient ones coming in next and next and next, right? So because you're going to reduce the amount of diesel generators that you are using in the system, you're going to get more efficiency in fuel consumption because we'll be using more efficient generators. So there are a number of initiatives that we're taking to improve efficiency, and that will be driven both by our internal initiatives and by the mandates of the regulator.
I'd like to add that the IRC would not just like to see efficiency in areas of generation and transmission and distribution. We also want to see more efficiency in the areas of administration and management at DOMLEC. So it's our approach will be very holistic. Okay? So we're not going to just focus on generation, transmission, distribution. We also want to see how DOMLEC improves in the areas of management, administration, and customer service, and the whole 9 yards.
Thank you very much for this. We have another question to the back.
Thank you. I will ask a question, but I want to make a comment before about the consultation. And when I look at, from 2 points of view, first of all, from the content of the presentations, and also from the level of participation. In terms of the content, I suspect we need to have a little bit of schooling before we can do justice as a public to the presentations you will. I hope you understand what I'm saying. It's a very high level of finance that you're talking. So we have to make the assumption that the people who are sitting here understand WAC and whatever. And I'm wondering whether or not, in order to improve the quality of the public contributions, both in terms of the number of people as well as the quality, and probably the IRC and whoever needs to probably, in advance of a consultation of this nature, actually co-opt, identify people in the community that can add more value to the consultation, identify them, engage with them, and try and get, maybe a cross-section of experts and people with experience just to make it a much more rich experience. So that's a comment I want to leave. In terms of the question that Mr. Paul raised about efficiency, I wonder whether or not you are able to provide us with some indication as to, while we strive for increased efficiency, where is DOMLEC in the scheme of things? I mean, there's Lucy-LEC and Bren-LEC and all kinds of LECs. Where do you sit in there? At what level of comparative efficiency are you? Are you in the middle, towards the top, towards the bottom? It would be interesting to find out. And also, in terms of what Mr. Case has just said, is there a mechanism that IRC has to ensure that whenever you're done with the tariff business and then you come to the KPIs, how are you going to ensure that DOMLEC meets those requirements? Are you going to impose standards on them that they have to meet, or is just going to be a conversation that goes on forever?
All right. To answer the last question first, will it be imposing standards and benchmarks or standards that they have to meet, as you said, and they will be reported on a monthly or quarterly basis. With respect to where DOMLEC stands with the rest of the region, Caribbean Association of Electric Utilities performs a benchmark study every year, I think, and it would show where DOMLEC stands in terms of efficiency against an international benchmarks. However, I'm not sure, maybe Mr. Snack can speak more to that as to whether there's an updated report out, but I'm not sure about that. Truly, I'm not sure. So as DOMLEC indicated, they have their own internal interventions and standards which they're trying to maintain. However, what we are looking at is the KPIs we are looking at is like 10 KPIs that speak to different areas of the operations. However, we will not be applying all the 10 at the same time. We will be introducing the most pertinent ones early, and DOMLEC will have, because we do not want to burden them too much by implementing a large amount of KPIs, and then they cannot really report on all of these KPIs in the manner that we would like. So we'll be doing it in a staggered form, and we'll be putting the most important ones that we think will translate into measurable results. These are the ones that we'll be applying first. And as time goes by, we will be informing the public on those interventions that the IRS will be taking that DOMLEC will have to comply with.
In reference to the first question, well, the Commission will reach out to a cross-section of stakeholders, persons with financial or accounting background, economics, business, to be present at our consultation. I must say, over the years, that has been our challenge. We are reaching out to stakeholders, we are reaching out to cross-sections of persons with the expertise in terms of finance, in terms of accounting, in terms of engineering, and just business-minded people, and we have been struggling. We thought in the final analysis of our rates, we felt that all persons would have shown up, because it has to be how the rate is going to impact our everyday life. Our children tend to study, washing, cooking, the appliances that we use, and we thought that we would have a larger turnout. But it is what it is. We also have a series of consultation targeted for Tuesday to meet with a range of stakeholders. It will be at Prevost Cinema. And we also have public consultation in the out district. So we have consultation which started today towards the end of April. So we are hoping, therefore, that this is the first for the rate design that in the rest, the upcoming consultation, people will attend. So we have it live on Cairo FM. We hope that at the next consultation, which will be held next week, more persons will show up. And of course, we try our best to explain it the best way possible. I know it's a technical, some of the language are technical. We have had a series of other parameters. The WAC, we dealt with that, the revenue requirement, we dealt with that. We aim to break it down as simply as we can, but we just hope that going forward, other persons attend and the consultation process is open, where people can give their feedback. We have the consultation going on hybrid, virtually and online, so we just hope that in the rest of the consultation, where we target specific stakeholders, particularly next week and in the odd district, that people will turn out. So we are assuming, okay, today's a Friday night, after work, probably some people want to chill, but next week Tuesday and next week Wednesday, we are hoping, therefore, when we meet with the stakeholders, that more persons with the knowledge, with the background, with the clearer understanding will show up at those consultations. Thank you.
I'd like to make a quick comment on that. How people participate really depends on how important it is to you. And I would recommend if those larger stakeholders are very concerned about the expert analysis of the documents that are produced in the tariff review process, they simply have to hire an expert to go through and to go through the documents and be able to ask the questions on their behalf. That is what is done in some of the larger economies. People hire their expert people who come to the regulator and testify to the regulator. Here are the issues that I see. So it is not expected that everybody in the public will know these issues, but you can get somebody to interpret that on your behalf. And even from ourselves as a regulator, I don't think it's a problem if we get tough and difficult questions. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for all this feedback, but just to let Mrs. Lee and Mr. Julian know, I think so far from monitoring social media, I think I only saw one comment in terms of someone saying, what does that mean? Like they could not understand. Maybe some of the presentation from you, Mrs. Lee, maybe just one comment we saw. So maybe generally, since you said you'll have been breaking down, so I think more and more people are understanding. People are also following us online. We got one or two questions online as well. We are going to continue again with, just to support the work with the, in terms of letting people know more. The attendance is not what we expected this afternoon, but I think in all of this, the main player, the IRC as regulators are taking the lead on this. The main player is DOMLEC, so we just have to encourage you to also give us the support in getting the message out. And as we are doing a lot right now on social media, to really put everything, if you see our LinkedIn page, our Facebook page, the website is what we have actually amended our website and put in an area just to provide rate review. This is how far we have gone. When all of this is over, a couple months down, we can then remove it and then post just the new rates. So we are asking everyone and DOMLEC as well to support us in this drive and give us that same type of enthusiasm that we had to encourage people to be there as well. So also from there was a question on the peak hours. I don't think you specified what. I think the listeners would like to know how you determine the peak hours. So if you could probably let the listeners know it is from whatever PM to, so they're very clear. Because someone is saying they said it looks shady, but it's not shady, there is a fixed time. So let's just clarify that for those who are listening. time it starts, what time it ends, so we know from now on we can no longer maybe have people ironing for us at 10 o'clock in the morning. So you're going to give us the new time, we're going to do everything in the night.
Yeah. So the peak period is from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. and that is on weekdays, right? And on weekends, it's from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. The off-peak period is from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. on weekdays, and on weekends, it's from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Okay, so for those of you listening, that off-peak where you will get the lower rate, it really clicks up from 10 p.m. 10 p.m. Just for clarity. Thank you very much, Mr. Julian. Another question, well, yes, I think we kind of explained this. Someone was asking, about the reflection of the change in the lower bills as how it's affected by geothermal, and yes, this is the main driver with the lower bill. I think. Okay, someone wants to know who is classified as low-income earners, as mentioned by the financial analyst. I know we have the two classes for domestic. So they're asking who is classified as low-income. Is there a class?
There is no classification for low income.
Yeah.
But what the tariff intends to do, it is assuming that the usage correlates with income. So the people who use less are generally lower income, and the people who use more are generally higher income. So that is why there is a lower tariff towards the lower consumption end.
Okay. Also on the charges, Mr. Julian, you mentioned the increase for residential, the base rate, the fixed rate, which is going to increase from $2.50 to $5. However, when you made mention to industrial and hotel, I am not aware of I did not hear you mention what your fixed charge was.
The fixed charge is for commercial, industrial, hotel, and high voltage. It's $50 per month.
$50 per month is the fixed. Okay. Thank you very much for that. And could you give an explanation on not everyone is in time of use. Not all domestic, you said, is in time of use. So can you just maybe clarify, give us a little bit more clarity on that in terms of how you determine, because I want to know if I'm in time of use as opposed to my neighbor. Who is in and how is this determined?
It's determined based on your consumption. So for the domestic standard who do not get time of use, if you use up to 150 kilowatt hours per month, you will be in the standard rate without time of use.
Okay, so that's the same group that gets no VAT?
Yes.
So that's the same group. So lower consumption, no VAT, but you also get no time of use. Right. So those of us who go higher than
150,
we are the ones.
then
Okay,
you get
so
time
that's
of
for me.
use. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, I hope our listeners are picking up on that and understanding the difference, as it will apply to the general residents. Any questions from the floor? Just one second.
Good evening.
Okay, we're going to take another question from the floor.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
My question is whether DOMLEC has any plans to revise that policy concerning the basic rate of 250. Because I have had a problem with DOMLEC for the past 4 years, which I'm trying to resolve. And it still has not been resolved. My problem is not the amount, but the policy they have. Because, for example, I have an account for critical, After Maria, I opened the account. After Maria, I opened the account with $45. When going to pay my bill, my normal bill, I usually find out what is the balance on Vertica. Sometimes they will tell me I'm owing $20 or I'm in arrears of $20. So I would put probably $30 extra, I would put extra on it. Other times when I go, they will tell me I owing $20, but I have $50 on the account. To me, that does not make sense. If I have money on the account, then whatever you say I owe should be taken off from the account. And that is why that amount has reached $127 now on the account. Imagine on coming to this meeting, I stopped at SMAT to find out what is the status on the account. And I was told that I am owing $25.50, something about that, but I have $127.55 on the account. That doesn't make sense to me. I went to DOMLEC on 2 occasions. They told me that they have no authority to deduct money from the account. They got me to write letters on 2 occasions, giving them the authority to take off the money from the account. And it's still happening. As I said, this afternoon I passed and they told me I have $25 and change owing, but I have $127 on the account. So that something needs to be done with that policy. If I put money on the account, it's not for good looks. If you are owing, take off the money from the account. Simple as that. Thank you.
Yeah, that is a specific question, and it's very difficult to answer it here without knowing the details. So I would recommend that you actually come to the office in Roseau and discuss that with them so they can... Well, it's very difficult to solve that problem here tonight. Yeah. What's your name, sir? Roy Pascal? Okay. So we'll take a look. You can leave your number with us. We'll take a look and get in touch with you. All right? We can get it afterwards.
Okay. Thank you for your comment, Mr. Pascal, and I hope this can be resolved after the meeting at the office. Okay?
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Question. I want to know the outcome of the consultation. Is the revised proposal, is it a fait accompli, or after consultation you can do some revision of the tariffs or the proposal or stuff like this?
Yeah, it's not a fait accompli. The purpose of the consultations is to receive comments from the public and the stakeholders, and all comments will be reviewed by the IRC and based on its merit, and if there are any ideas that comes out of the consultations that are worth pursuing in terms of adding value or having to tweak certain aspects of the proposed structure or anything like that, it will be considered seriously and implemented. We will work with DOMLEC to see how we can work, and then if it is possible, changes will be made before the final determination. So that's the whole purpose of the consultations.
Okay. Well, in that regard, I'm looking at I don't know how you came about the peak, determining the peak and the off-peak period. Yeah, because I see very little or no benefit to consumers, domestic or commercial, based on the way that the time is allocated. 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. By 10 p.m. everybody is basically asleep. You know, commercial buildings are closed from 8. I mean, you know, that to me that we need to look at that, at least revise it, so that we, the consumers, can accrue some benefit. Because the whole proposal, you're saying, well, we can get some savings. Yes, can. It's can, not will, can. And for us to be able to, we have to be able to utilize and work within that time span. And I think from 8 to 10, it doesn't give we, the consumers, especially domestic, and some of the commercials, that leeway to work within and to get the advantage that the different rates and the time of use can give us. Maybe IRC can look into that. And also the rates, the difference in the tariff from the peak and the off-peak is very minimal, just a few, 3 cents for maybe 6 cents for the most, maybe. You know, I mean, off-peak and peak, it's I mean, if you look at it, the domestic side. So there's just some things I noticed, and maybe we can look at it. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much for this comment, Mr. Williams. Appreciate it. Yes.
Just a question for you. In terms of the time period, peak, off-peak, and peak, what would you suggest? That's why we are having these consultations.
I mean, I don't know what study was done to determine this time. But for domestic, I think we could maybe look at especially the cutoff time from 10. We could maybe look at something earlier, maybe from 8 to 8. I will look at that. And on the Saturdays where most people are at home, you could put it from the peak from 6. I mean, we could look at that going from a weekend Saturday to maybe from 8 as well, or you know, and give people that advantage from 6. We're going to wake up. I mean, come on, you have laundry, you have this, you have ironing. You know, you're not going to take advantage of that. I mean, come on. We know how things work in DOMLEC. We know how we are. We know how commercial buildings work. We know how. Hey, I do have a small business, and I don't operate after 10. I operate from 8 to 4, 8 to 5, maybe 8 to 6. I don't see how I can benefit from that. So that's something we can look at.
As a follow-up to that, is there any study that was made for, or do we have maybe how many small businesses actually operate just for commercial people like you? If we knew maybe how many businesses we have, which would be actually be operating that late, maybe further than 10, that they could, benefit from that. Maybe generally, no, maybe most of us could be sleeping during the week by 10, but I am sure there was some thought process into that. So if there's any information that you all can share. One of you.
Mr. Williams.
Okay.
So one comment I would make on that is, at the end of the day, if we as a society want some change, we also have to make some changes on our side. I don't think it's incumbent on DOMLEC to make all the concessions. I think we as consumers have to see how we can do certain things. So take for example somebody who does manufacturing. It is very possible. I'm not saying this is what needs to be done or this is what, but it's something that can be done. You could actually move your processing from, instead of doing daytime processing, you actually run a night shift. And those are the things we need to, as a society, start looking at to see what behaviors we can change to be able to take advantage of the opportunity. I guess when it comes to the cost difference, on one hand, whilst you say it's minimal, depending on your consumption, that could actually be a large number you're saving depending on your consumption. So if you're saving 6 cents per kilowatt hour and you're running, I don't know, a megawatt hour every month, you would be saving a substantial amount of money from that. So, you know, it's a give and take, and we kind of have to look at the other side of the coin as well, because DOMLEC needs to stay viable, because if they're not making money, then we kind of in a jam as well. So,
Thank you very much.
Just to support what Jason just mentioned, I can give you a practical example for a residential customer who uses more. If you have an AC unit, typically you're using it during the night, not during the day because you're not at home. So it's a big opportunity for savings for you. And about the earlier peak, there is an evening peak, right? So when everybody gets home 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock, there's a peak. So if you have lower rates during a peak, more people are going to come on and you lose the efficiency of having a lower rate in the later hours of the evening, right? You're going to create more expense instead of reducing expense. So that is why, based on the load research, it was put there. But in future tariff reviews, I'm sure it can be looked at again and see what is the result of this first effort in doing time of use. That would be my thinking on that.
Thank you. Okay. Question from the back.
Hi, good evening. Few questions from my end. I echo the sentiments about I would say the level of the presentation. It is very technical. Even me, with my finance background, I had to be rolling numbers at the back of my mind during the presentation to really get a grasp and understanding of it. And I think based on the challenge I foresee in the market is really understanding what is happening. Because apparently the impression is all about geothermal is coming, we're just going to get a straight reduction in the cost of electricity. But based on the presentation today, there is much more to it than just that. There's the fact that, first of all, DOMLEC has to increase its rates. But after increasing the rates, it's because of geothermal it's able to keep it at a managed level. Am I correct to summarize it like that? And I think that's the message we have to get across to the public and even to the private sector, because the whole notion is geothermal reductions. There's no thought about the fact that DOMLEC has to, as Jason said, remain viable and they have to increase their rates. So we have to find a way to tailor that message for everyone to understand the two dynamics that are happening at the same time. One question I had was in terms of the hydro facility. I did not hear anything about it. Is that going to have any impact on the rates in the future? For example, if we have another Maria and the plant goes down, is that going to cause the rate to go up?
Well, yes, for the moment that the plant is unavailable, hydro is one of the lowest price sources of generation. So if it's unavailable, you would tend to have a price increase during the time that the hydro is unavailable. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That to me leads to a point. I think we also have to be cautious.
And I'm speaking specifically about the bill, because
yes,
you would have to substitute the hydro with diesel and geothermal. Well, the geothermal would be at full capacity, so the substitution would be naturally diesel.
Yeah. Okay. And then that sort of ties into I would say, projection of savings, I feel a bit cautious about saying that you're going to have a savings because it's all tied to the behavior and the operation of the various institutions. For example, in some aspects of the private sector, there is not much that they can do to benefit from the slow periods per se. Because if they operate in a certain service, it's standard from 8 to 4:30. For example, a bank, I don't think a bank can do much to offer banking services during the down periods. So I don't think everybody is necessarily going to be able to benefit from the difference between the peak periods and the slow periods. It's just the nature of how things are. So when we communicate savings, I think we have to be very careful to tie that communication to how you're able to adapt to achieve some of the savings. Now, I've also had a case where somebody already approached me looking at the quote-unquote savings, but challenging it because I think they did not understand that at the back end there is also the increase in price, because once again the notion is geothermal reduction in rates. So we have to be careful in terms of letting people understand that two things are happening, and in terms of savings, it's just about your ability to make use of the new facilities that DOMLEC is putting in place to assist. I have also one concern about the different classes. First of all, I think it's a very good move to segregate it to that extent. But in terms of the definition of a small company and then the jump to commercial large, I think that maybe we should consider having a medium tier. Because based on conversations that I've had with small operators, in spaces where you have 1 to 2 people, they already surpass 500 kilowatts a month. So naturally, the operation is small, but they will be classified as commercial large just by the nature of how they run the business. So I'm thinking maybe we could have a tier that is at medium up to 750 or medium up to 1,000, and then you eventually jump into commercial large to sort of make it a bit more equitable in terms of segregation. And the last question that I had was the presentation from DOMLEC in relation to the rates. Is that something that can be shared as well for us to analyze and try to? One area particularly to me where it was in relation to the commercial, the existing rates compared to the new rate had us a very small difference in terms of. But then based on the previous table with the savings, it shows that yes, there is no quote-unquote guaranteed savings. And that's not considering the fact that I also noticed the from $4 a kilowatt to $12, I think will sort of push it back up, plus the demand charge of $50, if I remember correctly. So I saw that quickly, and it just triggered in my mind that in truth and in fact, they may be actually paying more money than what we are actually saying that they will be saving. So I think sharing that document and giving them an opportunity to analyze it, to prepare, will also help the private sector.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Mr.
I'd like to respond to his last. The data is available on our website for download. So both the cost of service study as well as the new rates proposal are both in the folder on our thing. And well, the cost, the rates, the new rates are there, and also the billing part. I would also like to say that for the time of use customers, be it commercial, industrial, residential, whether no interventions are taken by the customer, when from the time they enter the period that they will enjoy a lower rate, the off-peak period, it will impact their bill. So without doing anything, they will enjoy the lower rate during the off-peak period. So therefore, banks and certain commercial entities that cannot really move loads around will still enjoy a lower rate, irrespective. Okay. What was the other? We'll embrace the comments that you made, and see how better we can improve in terms of the technical aspects of the presentations. That's a very big challenge for us in terms of reducing it in a manner that the public will understand, as the majority of the public, I will not be familiar with the technical jargon or the methodology that was utilized in arriving at where we are in deriving the rates. From what we know, the average person just wants to know if their bill going to go up or down. So that's why we are encouraging members of the public to attend the consultations, and so that they can see how this really works for them. Back to you.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment as well. Thank you, sir, for your very insightful comments. What you mentioned on the performance of the hydro and also the performance of geothermal will be very critical as to whether we realize savings in the future, right? So the geothermal system needs to perform according to what has been outlined, according to what we expect, according to how the terms of the contract are. If that doesn't happen, then these savings may not align with what has been projected. And that's just true for any form of generation, so we need to bear that in mind. And the GM actually this morning told me to mention that, so it's a good thing you brought it up, since I sort of glossed over it in my presentation. So as it relates to the medium tier that you suggested, what we did really, we looked at the consumption pattern, right? I know a lot of people have the idea of, these businesses that are using more than, and that comment has been made to us before. So one of the things that I would mention to you is that we will see how it performs. I would recommend no change now, right? We will see how it performs during this 3-year period, and the tariff is supposed to be reviewed every 3 years. So we can look forward to how the time of use is working, how the categorization of the different sectors are working, and probably in future tariff reviews, those can be adjusted. And I would think some adjustment would happen in a future tariff review period. So what the situation with the small business is that the overwhelming majority of our commercial customers will actually qualify as small businesses. And I can give you the number. Towards the end of last year, the number of commercial customers was about 4,500 commercial customers presently. When we do that segregation, you're going to get over about 3,200 of those customers will actually be small business, and about 1,290 in that range will be commercial. So the overwhelming majority of the customers are actually small business based on the results. Now, obviously, when you make a cutoff, there are some customers that are going to fall on one side, and there are customers that are going to fall on the other side. And you may, if you're close to the boundary, you may feel that you've been, you got the short end of the stick. But there must be a point at which you do the cutoff. So, yeah, that was it. You mentioned the commercial, the small difference between the rates for commercial. Well, basically with commercial, we essentially tried to not increase commercial too much, but there is an increase in the rates for commercial. The fact is, when the rate design is done, there are two categories that can move the revenue. Those are all the domestic as a group and the commercial as a group. And you look at industrial, hotel, all these other, they're very, very tiny. The two big revenue drivers are commercial and domestic. So really, that's where you can get significant change in the revenue outlook for DOMLEC. So unfortunately, that's just the way it is. So we hope, well, what we're hoping is that the time of use for the commercial people, even if you can't move your business into the off-peak period, you will be able to get some benefit from that. And those who can move their consumption will get a big benefit. All right, so you mentioned also the difference between the peak demand, the demand. Right now, it is $4.52 per kVA. Now, if I were to try to equate those, that would be about $5 and a little, $5.50, $5.40 in that region per kilowatt compared to $12.50 per kilowatt. Because previously it was in kVA, which is a bigger unit. So basically, we are a little more than double the impact of demand, right? Whereas if you look at it straight, it's more like triple, but it's closer to double, a little more than doubling of the demand. So that was done on purpose for the very large customers in order to move a little of the revenue from kilowatt hours to demand, because the very large customers, they put a greater burden on the system, right? So that aspect of the billing captures that.
Okay, one question from the back, Mr. Lawrence?
One question?
No, I mean one.
All right, listen, I'm really happy that the IRC is taking it, it's going to take this thing about participation seriously. Because if you want to legitimize the process of public consultation, having the consultation is not enough. It has to be structured in such a way that there is meaningful participation, and that the participation and the contributions will lead to the final decision. So, you know, DOMLEC, when you say, well, the next time, it suggests that this time is already taken care of. I know that that's not what you intended.
That was in one aspect only, and that is our suggestion. The regulator is the final decision maker.
No. Listen, the gentleman asked the question whether it was a fait accompli, and the answer was no. But sometimes, in the course of the conversation, you can get mixed signals. So I'm saying, in fact, I wondered, and I did speak to somebody about this earlier, whether it would have been wise to have the consultation before the IRC went on the radio and said that there's a 4% something. You know, it would see whether or not at the end of the consultation the determination was made that 4% was the right number. The timing of the publication of that number could give the impression that it was a better number. That's just a comment I make for future consideration. Two quick questions. One is, the 4% that is being suggested, does that include or will it take into consideration DOMLEC's requirement for a profit? Or is it just to meet the shortfall? And secondly, we've been talking about geothermal. So when we say that when geothermal comes on, we mean 100% of the geothermal capacity that is being built up now? In other words, what percentage of the total generation will be from geothermal? I think that's a useful bit of information to have. And finally, this whole thing is based on what you call revenue forecasting. In other words, it's based on your projection for what your revenues are going to be. Am I correct? The tariff?
The tariff, it's based on a test year, actually.
Okay, it's not based on a test.
So you pick a year and you do the revenues based on that particular year.
The test year is a future year.
No, it's an actual year, very close actual year, but because of the amount of time, it's a year that's well in the past. It's 2023 in this particular period.
So
it's a 6 months actual of 2023 and 6 months projected of 2023.
But if we're in 2026, what's the challenge of doing a projection for 26? You would have your financial statements for 24 and hopefully 25.
So in terms of projections, what is the value of using a projection for 2023 when we are 3 years hence?
Yeah, I would leave that really, let the IRC answer specifically that part of it, but I can give you an answer as well. Okay, well, for us, the process started way back in 2023, right? So you cannot use typically you don't use a future year because you would have to project everything. So you use a year, either the current year or a recent past year as the test year, so that you actually have real figures in order to work with, basically. And that is a standard practice the world round, and you get pretty reliable results from that. Yeah.
So what are the chances that in 26 the numbers are going to be way, way different from the 23 numbers that you projected?
Based on the good part of it is that we have real figures for the entire year of 2023. Okay, so the test year, we call it a test year, but it's just really a reference year. It could be 2024, it could be 25, but at the end of the day, it has to be a year where DOMLEC has normal operations without any adverse effects such as hurricane and so on. Now, DOMLEC after Maria took some time to return to normal, and because of that, we chose 2023. And we are now in 2026, based on the information we have in looking at DOMLEC's annual reports, it would not make much of a difference between 2023 or 2024 and 2025. Currently, DOMLEC is not viable. Okay, more details can be provided to you on that from the accounting staff, and it's over almost 20 years since a tariff review was done. To be realistic, 20 years is a long time, and prices going up in every way, parts for generators, salaries for staff, vehicles, everything. So to be realistic, it is overdue. DOMLEC is overdue for an increase. And at this point, their operations, if they don't get that increase, the operation, they would not be sustainable for very long. And that's the facts of the matter.
Yeah, and just to add, we spoke about the test year, which was based on DOMLEC 6 months actual and 6 months projected. But we also look at the capital investment plan, which was based on a 5-year capital investment plan. So of course, we also looked at the investment that they were undertaking or they contemplated to undertake in 2024, 2025, and 2026. So in looking at our required revenue and looking at the trend, we look at the investment that would form part of, that would come in on stream after 2023.
Without this tariff design, it is not the best. I will tell you, it is not the best. After Hurricane Maria, for example, we had the restoration going on for months, and we hardened our network with better quality poles and more expensive at that. The capital investments made were a lot, and not to mention insurance. Insurance was skyrocketed. So the situation is not the best, You asked about the 4%. Right. Well, as I mentioned in my presentation, all studies resulted in the direction of a 5.5 increase. 5.5% increase on the base revenue. But we at DOMLEC, and also in discussions with the IRC, we looked at the affordability of the customers, and we have decided to reduce it to 4% increase on the base revenue. I hope that answers your question.
To reinforce what Quentin has said, it should also be added that in the analysis that was done, we looked at the upper quantity and the lowest quantity that we could go to consideration of the affordability of customers, economy. We looked at everything, and the 4% is what we took the optimum minimal. Going below that is like no difference for DOMLEC. So let us say we were able to go to 3 or 3.5, DOMLEC would still be in the situation that it is. So this 4% is the optimal minimum that DOMLEC can go to for it to be viable. Okay, so we are still working. We encourage comments and insights from the public. Wherever we can do better, we'll do better, but this is what it is.
Go ahead and say it.
Okay, just one more curious question. I don't think it can be answered, but right now, is there a possibility of sort of reducing the commercial rate and spreading it across the board so that the private sector can get to benefit from this quote-unquote savings? Because I'm happy that you said it plainly that you see the private sector as one of the pillars to increase revenue, but at the same time, I think that the private sector has been working hard to play its part, and they do deserve to benefit from the geothermal like the ordinary citizen. It's just a thought for consideration when you deliberate on it further.
Yeah. Actually, if you notice in the savings when it was presented by Mrs. Louis, there is a savings for the commercial. I can't remember. It's about somewhere like 10%. I don't know. Let me see if I have it on my presentation for the commercial. Right, a typical commercial. We have it as 2,016 kilowatt hours for a month. They would have a savings of about 10.5%. That's in dollar terms, it's about $340 per month in savings, right? And that's primarily from geothermal. It's not in the rates, because as you know, the rates are not really going down for the commercial sector. But yep, if you're in small business, you do get a better reduction. So it's about almost 15%. So on a bill of $666, you would save about $97, which is about 14.7%, right? And again, primarily assuming that geothermal operates as intended, right? So yes, the commercial sector does get a benefit, but what I was explaining is that there was a lot of difficulty in setting the rates. So if you raise the rates of a particular sector, you decrease the rates of another sector. If you decrease another sector, you raise. So essentially what I was saying is that the two largest customer sets are the domestic, the residential as a group, and the commercial, including the small business. So if you are reducing the commercial rates, you're raising the rates for domestic. So in your home, you will get a higher bill, and everybody else will get a higher bill. So those are you push down on the commercial, you certainly have to move up on the domestic. The hotel, the industrial, you can't really go there because if you push down on commercial, their rate will shoot up because it's such a small sector. Right? So that's what I was trying to explain. These are the two main areas where you can push on the bill.
Okay, thank you for this. There was a general comment that we received on just the general economic situation right now in Dominica, and the fact that we hardly have much of this heavy industrial and manufacturing, for example. So I think the comment was generally very few in that group would actually benefit from the time of use. And generally, whether we look at whether it's restaurants or stores or whatever it is, they will be kind of shut down. So some general comments we are getting that it's not very beneficial, or the reduction that is being referred to is sort of minimal. I would also like to say that on the as part of our schedule, there are two very important dates: May 8th and May 29th. These 2 dates are for closing off on the responses. So all the comments that we receive, you can see we have our stenographer here, we're recording everything, we are taking in all the comments, all the questions, we are answering them. So this is to review and to update the consultative document so that on May 8th, we close up on this. We will resubmit the document with all of these questions, and then it will be open again for further questions throughout May, and then on May 29th will be the other date for closing. So these are two very important dates, so it is not a fait accompli. The IRC as regulators will continue to review and respond, and I'm sure we are getting information via email, we are getting comments on social media. All of this is being taken into consideration, and if there's anything significant, anything that needs to be reviewed or made changes, I'm sure we as the regulators are responsible to ensure that these are all addressed and taken into consideration. Do we have any other questions from the floor before we have a wrap up by Mr. Timothy, just to give a summary of what we did this evening? Mr. Timothy, I see you're down on the program. So, and please continue to send in your comments via email or social media or drop in at the office.
Okay, good evening everyone. I'd just like to thank everyone for the attendance. This has been a long process for the IRC and DOMLEC. We've had a few public consultations, and as enunciated earlier, we'd really like to have a bit more from the public to help us satisfy what you want from us. We can't do it on our own. It's supposed to be a collaborative process. So we're just trying to wrap up and hoping that everybody will be happy with the rates. DOMLEC will make some money, customers will get some benefit, and everybody will be happy. Alternatively, if everybody's vexed, it's also maybe a good thing too. Because that means the regulator is doing their job and keeping everybody gets something, but nobody gets everything they want. So with that being said, I'd like to thank everyone and wish you all a productive weekend.